We have seen the 5-to-1 progression as the primary harmonic motion in common practice music since we started analyzing pieces in Theory 1. Last week we generalized that concept and built the circle of fifths chord progression around the concept of roots descending by fifth. This week we will take that idea still one step further. If we follow the circle of fifths progression backward from our 5-to-1 authentic cadence, we find that the preceding chord will be a minor 2. This kind of sound is very common in many genres, and it sounds normal to our ears. Now, the progression gave us our root of re, and the key signature gave us the rest of the notes in the minor triad. However, in real life, composers don't always feel quite so restricted by the key signature. By using accidentals, it is possible to build a major triad on re, and this is also a pretty normal sound. Our task as music theorists is to decide what to call this chord. We can't call it a lowercase 2 because it's not a minor chord. I suppose technically it might be identified as an uppercase 2, but Roman numerals are supposed to identify chords within the context of the key. This chord is outside the key. And inside the key, 2 is never major. So uppercase 2 is a nonsensical designation, and using it defeats the purpose of the system. Let's start over and find a different perspective. If we look at this chord progression, it's clearly an authentic cadence, 5-to-1. And in fact, if we rewrite it without the key signature, using accidentals, it's still 5-to-1. We could even use these chords to figure out what the key signature should be. The strong, perfect, authentic cadence really leaves no doubt about what key we're in, even if it's not written down. In fact, this chord progression is so strong that it would still sound like 5-to-1 in A flat major, even if the key signature said something else. Because that sounds like tonic. This leads us back to our previous example, where we didn't know what to call the major chord built on the second scale degree. Let's look only at the first two chords. Even with no key signature written, this sounds like 5-to-1 in the key of G. When we put the last chord back in, the first two chords are still 5-to-1 in G, even though the progression continues and eventually cadences on C. And so rather than calling this chord anything in the key of C, the most descriptive thing we can call it is 5 in the key of G. Even though the piece surrounding this chord is in the key of C, that chord is in the key of G. G in the key of C is the fifth scale degree. And so what we will call this chord is 5 of 5. That means 5 in the key of 5. So just for a single chord, even though the whole piece is in the key of C, we're going to pretend like we are in the key of 5 so that we can get 5 in that key. 5 of 5 cadences to 1 of 5, which is of course 5, which then cadences to 1. 5 of 5, 5, 1. We call these chords secondary dominants. The primary dominant, of course, is 5 of the key you're in. Anything that is a secondary dominant means it's 5 in another key. Secondary dominants do not need to be in the key of 5. You could have a secondary dominant of 2, a secondary dominant of 6, or anything else. For instance, if I'm in the key of D major, my 2 chord, Do, Re, is E, so I expect that chord to be E minor. Now 5 in the key of E is B. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if I play B major, that's 5 of E minor, 5 of 2, which goes to 5 to 1. I'll do that without talking. So we see that the dominant to tonic functional relationship is so strong that it can override the surrounding key center and temporarily assert a local sense of tonic. Any chord within a progression can act as tonic and generate its own dominant immediately before itself. This opens up a wealth of new chromatic chords to be used in your harmonizations.